So Craig Emmerich is going to be in the room in 1 second. So let's do that. Hello.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yes, very well, Craig. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Sorry about the link mix up. I do apologise for that. That was my fault. Just for people that don't know you, Craig, could you just give us a very brief introduction to you and why have I invited you? Because you're so great, obviously. But what do you do?
Thank you so much. That's you're too kind. So, no, I've been in this space for a long time. My wife and I have. She's originally started down this path. I don't know, 25 years ago, into keto diets and fixing her own problems and her own health issues. That led her to writing books. I think we've written over, I don't know, 30 books now total of books and ebooks. And myself, it took me a little longer to come around to this lifestyle because I didn't have the health issues at the time that she did. But then I did develop Lyme disease. I started eating very meat-heavy keto diet probably about 18 years ago, and been on that ever since. And then about 9 or 10 years ago, I started getting some pain through my back, neck area, and shoulders, hips, and found out I had Lyme disease. And at that time, went full carnivore about, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And I've been carnivore ever since to help manage with the pain.
Cool.
Fantastic.
So a lot of experience in this lifestyle. I've my focus ever since, my more my background. I used to be an electrical engineer. It's also interesting to me that there's a lot of people in this space that are previous engineers. You have people like, Dave Feldman or Marty Kendall or Ted Neiman, there's a whole bunch of these engineers that ended up in nutrition. And I think a part of it is just we like to find core, root causes of problems and solutions to problems. Where in the healthcare space, I think a lot of people in healthcare tend to put more like Band-Aids on symptoms and things and don't go back to those root causes as much. And I think that's a skill that engineers can bring to this space and really kind of help out. And so I stepped away from engineering about, 15 years ago and just started studying biochemistry and helping my wife write books and then eventually jointly writing books together. And I would do all the science and biochemistry and front matter, and she would do the recipes, and it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I love talking to engineers, and my favorite joke about engineers is an optimist will say that a glass is half full, and a pessimist will say a glass is half empty, and an engineer will say, "Why is the glass the wrong size?" So,
I love that.
it's just the way the engineers think. They just don't accept status quo, and they say, "Right, I want to know how that works." And like you mentioned, Dave Feldman, one of my favorite people. When he wanted to know.
Even when I was a little kid, it drive my parents nuts because I would take everything apart. They have a radio, and they come home and it's all, in big pieces. And I usually put it all back together, and it usually always work again. But I always had to just take stuff apart, find out how it works, and that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, let's get on to the subject of nutrition because, that's the main reason you're here. And one thing I experienced last year was a little bit of blowback because I spoke to you, I spoke to Maria, and I was very surprised by some comments that a very small minority, that weren't very happy that I was talking about protein sparing, modifying fasting. And to the life of me, I didn't get it, why people were so triggered. So I don't care. I like you and I like what you say. And I think that's one of the things about this space, and Richard and I, we've had people on with very different opinions, but there's space for everybody because people are different. And if you've got a huge, which you have, and I've seen Maria's, success stories, if it's really worked for you and people are happy, then let's talk about it. Because if someone is struggling and this isn't fitting or high fat isn't fitting, whatever it is, here's another thing. It's just a different approach that's going to I think, tick the right boxes for some people. So, I wouldn't mind just you talking about your view of protein sparing modifying fasting.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple things right away. Number one, nobody has to do protein sparing modified fast. And I've personally never done it. I've never done a protein sparing day. It's just, I've had this, I've never had a huge weight problem. Back in the day, I probably had another 35, 40 pounds on me, at my peak than I am right now. But, I just gradually lost it with lifestyle and everything. And in general, it's usually easier for men than women to do that with this lifestyle because, if you just eat meat, for most men, things start to come in line fairly well. Not always, but, a lot of the time. It tends to be a little harder for women. They don't have much muscle mass and, so their BMRs are lower and there's, different factors there that can affect it. But again, you don't have to do them. They're just a tool. And what we do is we use them as a tool in place of a water fast. So there's people in this community that will talk about doing a 3-day fast, right? 3-day water fast, you eat nothing. So how is just eating some protein different than eating nothing? Like, how is that more extreme? All you're doing is this, and then it's a medical term, protein sparing modified fast. The protein you're sparing is your body's protein. And it's modifying a fast because a water fast, when you do an extended water fast, you do lose muscle. You do lose some lean mass. So you're modifying a water fast to spare your body's protein. So all it is really is little to no carbohydrates, very low fats, and you just get enough protein for your lean mass to maintain your muscle while rapidly losing body fat because it mimics a fast in that way.
Yeah, simple, really. Richard, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I've always done this intuitively. Now I came into this lifestyle from being diabetic and clinically obese, suffering with daily debilitating migraines, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, all sorts. And I went on to lose 107 pounds, reverse my diabetes, become completely medication free. Living this lifestyle has completely transformed my life, and I did it intuitively. Before, this was, a decade ago, before keto was known, very well within the UK. But I knew the bread bloated me, and that's where my journey began. But intuitively, I came from sort of an engineering background. I was a purchasing manager for an electrical engineering company. I did do a stint on the tools, but I'm not a qualified engineer. But I just thought that was quite funny that the tie there from engineering. But I gravitated into this, and there was very little information available at the time. The information that was available, I found to be misinformation. It didn't seem to coincide with the way that my body was reacting. But intuitively, I removed fat on certain days, and I found that I thrived while doing so. Now, this isn't disregarding the benefits of fats, because fats are essential. I need to be careful when I say this. I'm not telling people not to eat fat. Fat is your friend. Yeah, incredibly important. But this is a picture of me a couple of weeks after winning the European Championship as a men's physique bodybuilder, as a professional. So I went from being unable to walk up the stairs in my mid to late 20s to becoming number one in Europe at a professional level through living, this lifestyle.
Outstanding.
That was, thank you, appreciate that. I've come away from it now. As you can see, I'm half the size, and I've gone into endurance training. So I'm doing a lot of running and cycling, duathlons and things. But what allowed me to achieve that was intuitively taking out the fat. Protein carries a high thermic effect. If your body's going to preference carb, but I'm not eating any, and then I reduce and heavily reduce or completely remove as much dietary fat, then intuitively it just made sense for my body to utilize stored body fat. And I'm not saying that this is healthy. This isn't healthy. 2% body fat is not healthy, but it was fit for purpose. But what I find now, I eat intuitively. So some days I love fatty cuts of meat, but I do enjoy leaner cuts also on certain days. So for me, when I didn't even know that this had a term, when I began doing this all those years ago. But to me, it became intuitive. And when Stephen mentioned that you and him did a podcast and he had all of this backlash, and as you said, I don't understand. It's okay to go days without eating, but it's not okay to go a day or two with just eating protein, and it doesn't make any sense to me. But it's I'm interested to understand where the research from your aspect is. Where does this come from? When did you learn about this? Was this something that you came to intuitively and then looked into, or?
Yeah, it's partly intuitively, and then with further research, other sources. Like my wife used to call it pure protein days. So back, 15, 20 years ago when we were coaching people on, they hit a stall or something, we'd say, do a pure protein day, just protein, very little fat, no carbs. And it would help break a stall, and help them get the weight moving again and those kind of things. Through further research, we found actual studies and research on protein-sparing modified fast, which is essentially the same thing. And of course, there's the work of people like Lyle McDonald, he's got some great work and books on this going back, 10, 15 years on protein-sparing modified fast as well. And, like you said, with bodybuilders, it's, if you're doing a cut, you're basically doing protein-sparing modified fast, right? You're cutting the energy way down, trying to really get lean. And that's what works to cut. And it's just to get enough protein, make sure you maintain that muscle and cut all the energy down so you get real lean. And so at the end of the day, it's all about your goals, right? And that's the thing that we look at it as not so much of a one size fits all. Like everybody just eat the fattiest cuts, eat till you're satiated or comfortably stuffed, and everything will just be fine. It doesn't work out that way for a lot of people, especially a lot of women. And we get hundreds of people that have come to us, women that have followed that advice, especially women that have had a history of obesity and, leptin resistance, and they don't get the full signals as well, as other people who are either stalled for years eating high-fat carnivore or, even some of them gain weight, and so they go a couple months just gaining weight, 20 pounds, and they're just told to keep eating fatty cuts, and guess what? They never lose the weight. And then they come over and they just moderate the fat a little bit. Don't put a stick of butter on your steak. Just eat the fat that comes with the steak, or maybe even switch out one of the 2 meals for a leaner cut of steak, if a tenderloin or a piece of fish or something. Just switch it up a little bit, and the weight starts to come back off again. At the end of the day, the fat that goes in your mouth really has only a couple places it can go, right? Initially, it either gets digested and into the bloodstream or goes straight through you, right? That's about all it can do. If it goes straight through you, no, it won't be comfortable if a lot of fat is going straight through you. And this has been shown, there's been studies on this. There's a really good study that looked at exact same diets. All they did was change the dietary fat from like 68 grams a day to, or maybe it was 58 to 168, something like that, 100-gram change in dietary fat. And they collected all the stool so they could see exactly how much fat was ending up in the stool. And it was about 1.9 grams of fat with the lower fat and about a little less than 3 grams of fat with the higher one. So there's only like an extra gram of fat ending up in the stool when you add that extra 100 grams of fat in the diet. It's getting digested, and you want it to. I mean, think of it evolutionary wise. If our ancestors were carnivores, apex carnivores, they had to get through lean winter months, right? A lot of them were up in, northern parts of Europe where they've got to get through a winter. And guess what? To get through a winter, you had to put on some body fat. And if all they're eating is carnivore, how are they going to put on body fat if it didn't make you gain fat? So what they're doing, they're eating, especially in the fall, when the animals have fattened up, they're eating fattier meats, and it's putting on some weight to help them through the lean winter months, right? So you want the body absorbing that fat because that's the energy that's going to make you survive, in that environment. But back to so very little is going through the stool, so the rest goes up in the bloodstream. So now it's in the bloodstream. Where's it going to go? Either it gets stored in your fat cells, which is what you want it to do, because the alternatives are not good, right? If it stays in the bloodstream, you get sky high triglycerides. Nobody wants that. If it doesn't get stored in your fat cells, it's going to start to accumulate around your organs, in the organs, and your liver, fatty pancreas. You don't want that either. So you want it stored in the fat cells. So the majority of the fat you eat ends up in the fat cells. And that's just the biochemistry of the body, right? So from that standpoint, then, if you look at, I'm trying to shrink my fat cells and lose body fat, maybe if I just dial it down a little bit in the diet, I'll burn a little more out of my stored fat stores and lose a little more body fat. So from that perspective, it's really kind of simple when you think of it that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's still something that I do now, even though I don't compete professionally in running and cycling. I do it as a hobby and to keep fit and healthy, but I still like to race and to be competitive. I'll still implement this a week or two before an event just to shake off those extra pounds. But it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective as well, because we would have eaten every part of the animal.
Yeah.
And yes, some parts of that animal are fatty, other parts are not. So it just makes perfect sense that we would have eaten from nose to tail, and we would have had some days in which leaner cuts would have been.
Think about nature in general as far as that goes. You're not going to pass up any food, right? When you're out in that environment, go out there right now and look around. What's out there? Squirrels, very lean. Rabbits, very lean. Even deer, except for maybe in the fall, they're pretty lean. A lot of the wild game is very lean. Fishing, you catch some fish, pretty lean. And so you're definitely going to encounter lean meats in a natural environment. You're not going to just avoid those. Those aren't fatty enough. You're going to eat everything you can get in that environment. And so, yeah, I think fatty meats have a place, leaner meats have a place, depending on your goals, your situation, all that.
Can I ask you, there's a couple of things in the chat. One, I'm not sure about this at all, but I'll just ask you, Craig. Do you have some sort of content about mushrooms and coffee made from mushroom? Is that one of your things?
Coffee from I've heard of some of these. It's like a sort of coffee substitute made from mushrooms. I think I've seen that. I personally have never tried it. Yeah.
Okay. Someone's asking, and I thought maybe you'd commented about it. So I'll go to a more general question that we can talk about.
Well, I would say in general, mushrooms are kind of a cuff species, if you will. When you think about them, they're not really animal, they're not really plant per se, because plants use photosynthesis. It doesn't. I would say if any of the foods that are sort of maybe right on the border between carnivore and not, that's probably one of them.
Yeah, yes, that's it. I think that's sort of what they wanted to hear, the person there. But what about dairy? Because many people say that they have a fat loss plateau. Taking out dairy was a game changer or stuff like that. So what's your views on dairy?
Well, dairy's fine. If you're not sensitive to it. A lot of people do get sensitive to dairy in a lot of ways, and then you got to be careful with it. But I would say in general, we find this is about a 99% rule, where if you cut out all of dairy, you'll have faster weight loss every time. It's just one of those things that just slows down your weight loss. I think a big part of it is a lot of it is there've been studies on this of like satiety of foods, and nuts and dairy are two foods that are really dense in energy and nutrients and whatnot, but they don't trigger the same satiety as other foods. Like there's just something about cheese or nuts that you can just keep going back to, where a steak or jerky, you'd probably stop before you consume the same number of calories, if you compare the two. So dairy is totally fine. I just think that if you're trying to lose weight and you're not losing weight and you're stalled, maybe try cutting out the dairy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when it comes to dairy, it's the case of morphine that's highly addictive. That's what keeps taking us back there. Nuts and seeds, I think it's the lectins. Lectins block leptin, so they block the satiety signaling. I was highly addicted to things like peanut butter and macadamia butter, which I think is probably better than peanut butter because it's going to be mycotoxin free, slightly less in carb, but still, I believe macadamia butter would be lectin free also because macadamia nuts are lectin free. But these foods are highly addictive.
Yeah.
We're hardwired to chase these compounds. I love eating cheese. I think that cheese can work well living this lifestyle, providing we've healed the gut. I think casein can still cause that intestinal permeability, but generally within our society, once you've healed that gut, casein, cheese, and A2 dairy is well tolerated. I tend not to consume any milk whatsoever, though. But I am a cheese lover. But it's been a while since I've eaten. I tell a lie, didn't I? I had some cheese yesterday. I'm lying. I was on the road with my little girl. We went to see my mother. She wasn't home, so we started to pick at some of the shopping that I'd taken her to buy for herself, and cheese and some beef or chicken. I think it was actually was her food of choice. So we were eating this in the car. So I ate cheese yesterday, but yeah, highly addictive.
Yeah, definitely. And, I was just looking at a comment here. I just wanted to throw out there. I think it was Jill. She said she eats buttloads of fat, but she's still constipated. And so, if she eats more fat, she'll gain weight. I would check on your electrolytes. So here's the thing. The colon is like the master extractor of moisture from the stool. It can extract all the moisture from the stool if it needs to. And if you're dehydrated, you're not getting enough electrolytes to hold on to the water in the body. You can't really hold on to water properly and store it in the cells and everything unless you have electrolytes. If you're not getting enough electrolytes, the body will start holding on to all the moisture it can and pull it out of the stool. So adding electrolytes a lot of times can help with that and get things moving. And again, back to the, if you really overdo fat, it can go straight through you. There's no doubt of that. But it's a lot of fat. I mean, we're talking, well beyond the amount needed to gain weight. Let's put it that way for the vast majority of people. Now, if you're, 200 pounds, lean mass, man, just ripped, you'll probably never hit that point because you just can't consume enough to get to a point where you're going to start gaining weight. You have such a high metabolism, high metabolic rate. You're never going to, it'd be really hard for you to gain weight eating this way. If you're a, 55-year-old woman who's got a history of obesity, you're going to be able to gain weight fairly easily by overdoing the fat. And the vast majority of the fat you eat will get absorbed. And if it doesn't, you will know. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys remember the Wow chips, Olestra. It was a fake fat they made in the United States, and it didn't get digested. It went straight through you. So they're like, ooh, potato chips, where you don't count the fat because it goes right through you, right? They eventually had to make a label that basically said could cause anal leakage because of the uncontrolled bowel movements from an extra 8 or 10 grams of fat going out your stool from these chips, and eventually pulled them off the market as a result because of this. So if you got an extra 10 or even 20 grams of fat going out your stool, you're going to know you're going to be on the toilet all day and it's going to be very uncomfortable. So you'll know if that happens. Otherwise, the vast majority of that fat's getting absorbed, and you want it to because you need that fat for energy, especially if you're in maintenance. If you're in maintenance, you need all that dietary fat. That's your energy. That's what you need. You got some on your body, but majority you're running off of what you're eating if you're lean. And so you want that dietary fat to be absorbed, and it does get absorbed.
Excellent. There's somebody here talking about your post-surgery. Craig, I hope you're doing well post-surgery. Do you feel like carnivore helped detox from the anesthesia?
Yeah, I did a few things on that. So I had with my Lyme disease, I ended up getting ankylosing spondylitis. So chronic inflammatory response syndrome is it's basically this inflammatory state where your immune system is constantly fighting and it won't shut off. And that's what happened from my chronic Lyme disease. That SIRS then, because it's fighting constantly, it starts killing good cells, right? What's that? That's an autoimmune disorder. That's an autoimmune reaction. And we help people for the last 20 years. We've been helping, you name it, autoimmune disorders, conditions, everything with this lifestyle. We've seen incredible results. But here's the thing. If that autoimmune disorder was triggered by food, amazing results you can see with this lifestyle. If it's triggered by an external factor, mold exposure, Lyme disease, food is only going to take you so far. Food's going to help with the symptoms, which it does a lot for me. It helps with my pain, but it's not going to reverse. It's not going to get rid of the Lyme disease. There's nothing about eating a steak that's going to get rid of your Lyme disease, going to get rid of your SIRS. So anyway, I had a hip replacement because my hip had degenerated so much from the ankylosing spondylitis. That was about not quite 2 weeks ago now, about 12 days ago. Yeah, 12 days ago, I had complete hip replacement. I'm already walking without any assistance, less pain in my hip already. I contribute that to diet and lots and lots of protein to help heal and recover. I got my 2 weeks checkup tomorrow. And I'm really excited to see what the doctor says about how much healing's already happened. I also do hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatments, which I think has accelerated the healing and detoxing as well. So I think in general, they say in general for this type of surgery, by 1 month, you should be to the point of walking and everything with less pain than when you started. I think I'm there already at 2 weeks. So
that's pretty quick. I mean, that's a major operation, isn't it? I mean, it is pretty invasive. Anyway, now, although this says, "Hey, Richard and Stephen," I think we're also talking about you, Craig. So why are my ears and belly button nearly always itchy at night? Could it be dairy or even artificial sweeteners? As I do have a couple of artificial sweeteners, sweetened drinks per day.
It could be either of those. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that in our, I don't know, you can see it up here, our carnivore cookbook, we define the carnivore autoimmune protocol in that book. That is, just an elimination diet of, you first go to level 1, which is just beef and salt. And this protocol is for autoimmune disorders. It's for, rooting out sensitivities and things like this. And so you start there, then you add in other animal proteins for level 2. So, fish or, pork or whatever else you want to add in for animal proteins. And then level 3, you start adding in eggs. And then after that, dairy, because that's a, pretty common trigger. And so that kind of roots out maybe some of these issues. And what's great about that is you can, you do it one at a time and you can really isolate. So in your case, I would, try eliminating one of those two. Maybe ditch the artificial sweeteners for a week or two, see if the itchiness goes away. And if it does, you probably have your culprit right there. And if it doesn't, maybe try the dairy and see if that's the cause. But either one of those could cause that kind of symptom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of this elimination diet, isn't it? I mean, you can drill down to what's actually causing you an issue there. I'd like to ask you a subsidiary question, because you said start on number 1, zone 1, which is beef and salt. What about lamb? Where does lamb come into this?
Yeah, so if there's somebody really sensitive, like people with bipolar, or so that it could be autoimmune disorders, could also be a lot of cognitive issues, bipolar disease, whatnot, that people can do really well, really eliminating a lot of things and going to beef and salt. If you're really sensitive, we move from beef first into ruminants, so other ruminant animals, if you want to, eat elk or bison or those kind of things. And then, keep moving into a wider range from there. And that level 2 that we call kind of all the other animal proteins would include lamb, would include, any of those other animals. in the spectrum of, animal proteins. But we do also, if they're really sensitive, we have them add each one at a time. Because there are people, even with, we've seen people with, chicken, for example, that they eat chicken and they react. Sometimes that's the source of the chicken, because if they get a local farmer who they know is got free range, or actually out eating bugs, they don't react to that chicken. But the store-bought, where they're fed soy, they do react. So, there's a lot of different layers that you have to peel back. But yeah. So
yeah, I think, when we look at elimination protocols, people will begin an elimination protocol by removing one thing. But that doesn't always work, as you rightly say, because if you suffer with a condition from one, it's quite likely you'll suffer with a condition or an issue with another compound. And even within the carnivore remit, we think it's anything animal-based, but there are groups of people who can't consume eggs because of the ovomucoid. Yeah. Chicken, as you say, pork causes issues, seafood, coffee. And what tends to happen is, if you eliminate one of these things that is a big part of your diet, your lifestyle, then you start to consume more of another, and then you can never get to the root cause. So I think that protocol is very important. I would put lamb in the first one. I personally, unless there's a reason not to with that. Lamb is always grass fed. Yeah. And I personally, and I think Steve thinks along the same lines as myself, and I think this is why he's mentioned it. I actually believe that lamb may be more beneficial than beef. And I think beef is absolutely incredible. I eat lots of grass-fed beef. But the more I look into the benefits of lamb in regards to micronutrient ratios, vitamins and minerals, so on and so forth, I'm more inclined to think that lamb may even be more preferential, because we can't always guarantee that beef is grass-fed. We know that in the UK we're lucky. All beef is grass-fed, but what some places do that make this claim is they will harvest the grass, but it'll dry out by the time it's fed indoors. So it's not actually fed live grass. It's not always grass finished. And so even though we're fairly lucky, a lot of cattle are not kept indoors. Some are, and there are little tricks that we need to avoid. But sheep and lamb is always grass-fed, and the omega-3 content in lamb is considerably higher. I think it's around about 10 times higher than beef. I'm becoming a big lover of lamb. I love beef, but I'm just curious as to, is there a specific reason why lamb wouldn't be in box number one?
I think it definitely could be that next, the shell, if you will, of like ruminant type animals. I could definitely see the case you made on that. Personally, I don't eat lamb, so it's not in my. Nobody in our family really eats it, and I think in the U.S. it's probably a little less than in the EU as far as a availability of a food. So I'm sure that plays a factor.
And that's what. So we've been asking many of our friends over the other side of the pond in regards to the availability of lamb, and I think that the whole grass-fed beef thing comes from the States because it's preference there, and lamb maybe isn't so readily available, but lamb is well available for us in the UK. Although Colt said it is available, didn't he? But he just said it was incredibly expensive.
Yeah, so it's twice as expensive as beef, which would prohibit a lot of people, because beef is pretty expensive for a lot of people at the moment. Yeah. So for sure. let's not get down that path too much. Let's move on to a couple of other questions, because we haven't got Craig for long. Nice simple one here. I'm interested who you recommend protein sparing modified fasting for, and who you would recommend to avoid it. Is there sort of
generally, again, I would kind of slot it in as a tool, as a replacement, or sort of a improvement on a water fast. Okay, so if you're somebody who is going to do 2-day or 3-day water fast, replace it with a 2-day or 3 days of protein sparing modified fast. And so if you think about that, would you do, if you're very lean, if you're looking like the picture behind you there of eating nothing for 3 days would be not a good idea and would be hell, right? So don't do it in that case, right? If you're a very lean person and you're in maintenance, it's not needed. It's a tool for weight loss, not really needed. If you're pregnant, I wouldn't recommend doing it in that case either. If in general, if you got a decent amount of weight still left that you want to lose, and you're either stalled or you just want to speed up your results a little bit and throw a day here and there of protein sparing in to speed up your results, I think that's a perfect place where it's applicable, and it's a good tool for those kind of goals.
There's a question here from Gaza. Craig, do you have a book or a PDF? I think this man does have some books to tell you about. I do low-fat EOD and find it helpful, but of course it's better to learn from the path well trodden. So yes, Craig.
EOD. I'm not sure what you mean EOD there, but here's the thing. With it, end of the day, maybe, yeah. Here's the thing too with it, with protein sparing, it becomes an even better tool the more obese you are. And this is something that, we've had clients that, like Tyler, friend of ours, who he grew up with my wife's brother. He was 645 pounds. And in that case, he has so much stored body fat. There's so little need for dietary fat in his diet in the early stages that he would do, borderline protein sparing a lot of days. Normally we say like do 1 to 3 days a week, because just like you wouldn't water fast every single day, you don't want to do protein sparing every single day, so you use it a day here, a day there. If you've got 400 pounds to lose, you can use it a lot because the body's got all that fat stored. The essential fatty acids for the diet for things like cell walls, excuse me, this is not thriving in any way, and this isn't talking about maintenance. It's only like 15 grams of fat a day that are essential fatty acids. So those are, a lot of those are like your omega-3 DHAs for making cell walls and those kind of things that your body can't make. All the saturated fat, your body can make all the saturated fat it needs. It's right there in stored fat cells. That's all the saturated fat it needs. It can use all of that, tap into it for energy. So there's no essential fatty acid, minimum, if you will. But again, it depends. It's sort of a spectrum. It depends on your goals. If you are 200 pounds overweight, it can be a really great tool to get the weight off quickly, and you can use it more often early on. As you get closer to goal weight, you're gonna use it less because you have less body fat to tap into, and so you don't want to push it too much like that. And so you can use it as a tool that way.
Yes, just to reiterate. Book.
Yeah. Well, we have keto-adapted.com. So keto-adapted.com. If you go to our shop section there, we have about 20 ebooks there. One for you if you're looking specifically on that. There's a ebook called Carnivore for Weight Loss that I think would be perfect for you. It has a few protein sparing pieces in there, but mainly it's all carnivore.
Excellent. And Maria's books are fabulous.
Thank you.
James is asking, I see influencers that vilify carnivore with glycation end products as the reason. Can you clarify what this really is, and is it a concern at all?
I haven't seen that myself, to be honest. And glycation end products are typically coming from glucose glycation, not carnivore. So I'm not sure. I mean, the body is pretty smart, and there is some glucose that's needed by the body even when you eat zero carb. So a lot of the body's needs can be met with fat, either free fatty acids directly from your fat stores that go into your muscle and tissues to fuel them, or some of those free fatty acids will go to the liver and to get turned into ketones. And the ketones cross the blood-brain barrier and fuel the brain and brain neurons and some of those things. There's certain brain tissues and neurons that only run on glucose, and red blood cells can only run on glucose. Your red blood cells have no mitochondria, so they have to use glucose. So you've got some need for glucose in the body. And so the body will take protein off the body or from the diet, turn it into glucose as it needs for your body's glucose needs. But that's not going to cause glycation. That's not to any extent of, eating high carb diet's going to do.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that really quickly, Steve, I mean, one of the amino acids found in a more animal-based diet is carnitine, and that's a known combatant, if you like, of advanced glycation end products. So it just doesn't make sense from a nutritional or an evolutionary perspective. That one's a new one on me. I haven't heard anybody relate to the carnivore diet causing that previously.
Yeah, I put the question out there, but I didn't think that there was anything. And the thing is, people see other influencers, and I don't know what the threat, why that question has come up. Hence, I asked about the mushrooms as well, because Craig might have been doing a video last week about mushrooms. But yeah, so we're all foxed by it. But thank you for the question. Someone's asking here, can you please explain what you eat on protein sparing? But I mean,
yeah, like I said, I don't use it as a tool for myself. I don't really want to lose weight, but for our clients, we'll tell them, if you're going to do a real like protein sparing type day, then just eat real lean meats and don't add any fat to it. I mean, it's any kind of fish, any kind of seafood, leaner cuts like tenderloin, any poultry really, most poultry like chicken breasts or whatever. It's those leaner meats, and just eat whatever you need of those to stay satiated. And it could be a lot of meat. A lot of people say, well, I'm more hungry. Well, yeah, because you just ate a chicken breast or whatever, but it was only like 300 calories, for a whole chicken breast. Like, there's not a lot. You can eat a lot before you consume a lot of calories when it comes to lean proteins. But, eat all the lean protein you need for the day, and that's off the cuff, easy protein sparing day.